I had met a guy who represented John Carpenter. And he said, listen, Carpenter is really hot and we're getting more offers than he can possibly do. But, I think that we can put you in front of a lot of people who are looking for John, and you have a similar kind of filmmaking. And I think it could be very successful. And I said, I think that's a really good strategy. And little did I know that, 5 weeks, 6 weeks later, he called me up and said, well, what would you think about directing Halloween 2? And I said, well, I thought that somebody was already directing that. And he said, well, somebody was, but they had to drop out. And I've shown John and Deborah your short film and they really like it. And, I'd like you to meet with them. And so, it's so difficult. And then it's so easy, and it doesn't follow any logic. And
yeah.
I was the same person who had been getting rejected and rejected and rejected, and suddenly the door was open
in a big way.
Well, nobody knew quite how big, because the film hadn't quite become the film it would become. I mean, John was working.
Well, but Halloween had come out, right? So that and that was like genre, defining.
Yeah. But I mean, but when it first came out, it was successful, but it was not. It had not become sort of an icon. So,
what was your relationship to the first Halloween? Were you a fan? Did you care about horror?
No, I mean, I liked horror in the sense that it's very kinetic, and it's really about it's a lot of it. It's about execution. And it reduces filmmaking in many ways to its very basic elements, which I liked. I mean, you don't have to be, horror films traditionally don't have great acting in them. They don't have necessarily great plot, but they have strong setups and a lot of strong visuals. I felt comfortable. And also it was being shot on a very tight schedule, and I felt comfortable about shooting. I mean, I'm a shooter. I mean, I like to shoot, and I liked it. I come in prep, but interestingly, I came in the first day, I had my shot list, everything was all planned. In the first day, I didn't make the day. I was like, oh shit. I mean, how's that possible? I was completely prepped.
What was the first day? Do you remember what scene that was?
Well, I mean, I made it, but it was, it's the opening, it's the introduction to Jamie Lee. So, it's the opening shot with a steady cam on a crane that steps off the crane and goes up to the door and then retreats with Jamie and gets in the ambulance with her. I mean, it was a cool
complicated
shot. It was, I mean, I was like, oh my God. I mean, it turned out we did make it, but when we left there, the sun was coming up, and I felt, we had done 8 or 9 of the Steadicam shots, and I wasn't 100% sure that we had one that we had really nailed. It turned out take 3 was like, boom, that was it. So day 2, I was so discombobulated. I didn't do a shot list, and I just flew through the day. So I was like, well, wait a minute, maybe I don't need a shot list. So day 3, no shot list, hammered. Day 4, shot list, made the day. I'm like, I don't know, where's the
what is going on here? Okay, I want to get into that, but can we just backtrack a little? I want to hear about that first meeting with John. I don't know if it was with John and Deborah, but I assume you kind of had to pitch yourself and your vision for it.
It's really bizarre. I have no memory of that first meeting whatsoever. I didn't feel like I was competing. I mean, I felt like I was showing up as the starting quarterback unless I blew it. And so when I met with them, I mean, I just felt like I confirmed that I could do what they were looking to do. And I think I had done enough work of watching the first one and sort of understanding that it would be a continuation and that the style would continue. And I felt very comfortable with moving the camera. And I think I probably pitched the fact that if you look at my documentary reel, you see nothing but moving camera. I'm very comfortable with all of that, and I had done a fair amount of work with the script, and the script needed some work, and they were open to that. And so, when I said to John, I think these things, need to be addressed, he was like, well, you and Deborah will do that. You'll work on it together.
What were some of those script things?
There was just some, A, a little bit of logic, and B, as I recall, I felt like suspense is very powerful and slashing is not as much. And that, sometimes horror films can get too gory, but I like sort of fake outs and where you think one way where it's going and stuff. And so I was pushing, I think, a little harder for the suspense of it.
Mr. Garrett? Mr. Garrett?
Sorry.
Now,
Listen.
between when Halloween came out and when we started shooting, actually not so much when we started shooting, but when the first cut of Halloween 2 came out, the landscape had really changed. I mean, Friday the 13th had come out, and I mean, the world had gotten far gorier, and
Yeah.
I was still pushing harder for suspense. I mean, there's a scene that got cut out of Halloween 2 where Michael Myers goes into a room in the hospital that's the children's ward, and he sort of looks in and he looks around all point of view, and in the middle of the room is this table, and on the table is a wind-up, as I recall, it's a wind-up monkey with cymbals, you know, that plays a cymbal, and as he is moving around the room, he bumps into the table, and it sets the cymbals going ding, 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 like this. And out in the nurse's station, Pam Shoup hears that sound sort of down at the end of the empty, dark corridor. And she sort of goes, and she comes down the corridor and she comes into the room and she stops in the doorway. And it's sort of a slightly low angle, very vulnerable kind of shot of her. She's very beautiful and vulnerable. And her point of view is this monkey going ding, 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 ding. And then we cut to through the slats of the closet, and we see her as she walks toward the table to turn off the monkey. And we're just expecting Michael Myers to leap out of and she turns it off, and there's a moment of silence, and we can just barely hear his breathing, and we're just waiting for him to leap out, and she turns and walks out of the room. And, you know, everybody goes,
I mean, that will kill an audience. You're winding them up.
And I don't know, a combination of Deborah and John and Dino De Laurentiis, somewhere in there, they were like, well, that's not scary. Nobody dies. And I was like, well, that's the point. It keeps you on your toes, because every time you see them, people don't necessarily die. Also, they're kids. It's a funny distinction. Somehow he's making a distinction. He'll kill other people, but not the kids, and this and that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I lost that one. And that's on the cutting room floor, and has never got restored either. I mean, in the version that got some scenes put back in, that's not one of them.